Hello, welcome to Cpp.chat, a sometimes weekly look at what's going on in the world of C++, chatting with guests from the community. But before we get to that, I'm going to read a disclaimer. So this is a disclaimer about the disclaimer. Please note that disclaimers made by John on this or any other episode of Cpp.chat are not legally binding and are merely his passive-aggressive response to what he perceives as our overly litigious society. And now over to John for his disclaimer.
Thank you, Phil. And here is this week's disclaimer. The following information details the disclaimers and the terms of use of this episode by you, the listener or viewer. You use this episode conditional upon your acceptance and compliance with the disclaimers and terms of use contained in this statement and any other notices accepted by you. By consuming this episode, you agree to be bound by these terms of use. Should you at any time not accept any of the disclaimers and or terms of use, you should not use this episode and should contact our office for assistance.
Quite right.
That'd be your house, right? So we'll be sending people around.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Hey, so this is going to be a lot of fun. We have Matt Godbolt, who is joining us. We're very fortunate to have him because he was just putting out a fire, and
I actually, well, I was hearing about a fire. I'll tell you later, but I've lost my cell phone, and so I didn't know about this until I got home.
Oh my!
Anyway, someone else was dealing with it, so thank you, Patouf.
It sounds like a tough week. Lose your cell phone and have.
Shout out to Patouf, though.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
So before we dive in, we should do kind of a roundup and talk about what's going on. I think it's been kind of a quiet week. Lenny Moriani. I'm not sure how to say Lenny's last name. Lenny was on CPP.cast. Just Lenny, that's right. He was on CPP.cast. And of course, they were talking a little bit about the new location for CPPCon, so I was very excited about that part. I'm sure they talked about C++ in there somewhere too.
Yeah, there was a lot of very interesting things about the trading industry that I've recently left myself. So it was interesting to sort of hear him reminisce about old times. So I really enjoyed that episode. But
yeah, kind of looked at it from him being the new guy. So it was all new to him. Old hat to you, but yes.
There's always something to learn. Always something to learn.
Yeah. But I mean, the overall concerns, I mean, that's what he was talking about. It's kind of a shift of your perspective about what, in fact, something you were saying just a bit ago, which is, we have a problem and people lose lots and lots of money. So we're very, very aware of that kind of thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What else is going on? CPPCon, I think all the videos are up. Call for class proposals are up. And I do have all the speaker portraits. So I appreciate patience of those of you who have not been bugging me about speaker portraits, and also the patience of those of you who have been bugging me about speaker portraits. But you can bring on the bugging. I will send them back with speaker reviews. I think I have all the speaker reviews put together, more or less. So yeah. So so those things should be going out soon, very soon. And we're in the process for C++ Now. We're in the process of getting the call for submissions out. So be looking for that very shortly if you're interested in speaking at C++ Now. And I'm kind of hoping the people on this chat are.
And if you're not, you should be.
Maybe.
And if you're not, you should be. That's right.
I'm terrible at these kinds of things. I have no imagination when it comes to talk topics. It's only ever when we've been talking that things have come up. But
yeah,
CPP Now is the beautiful Aspen setting talk venue.
Yeah,
right?
it's the one that's in Colorado, right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So what's going on C++ on C? Are we sold out?
Not quite, but we're steadily working towards that.
Yeah.
But there is some news this week. Something that people have been asking me about for a long time, and I finally got to push it out. Two things, actually. We have a students program. So students can buy tickets for just £50 instead of 450.
Wow.
So that should help some people. But then also a volunteers program. Now, there's no limit on the number of students right now, but there is a limit of 10 volunteers going to be accepting. They'll be free to get into the conference. Obviously, they'll have to do some work for that. Just a bit of a song and a dance, that sort of thing. But they will also get accommodation as well. So it's just travel they have to cover. And if you're a student and you also want to be a volunteer, you can apply for both programs. So if you make it onto the volunteer program, you get everything for free. So all that information is up on the website now. So if that's of interest to you, go and check that out.
Sure. Now, when you're talking about students, you're talking about full-time. What's the parameters of this?
Yeah, well, it's all laid out on the website. But yeah, you have to be in full-time education. And I haven't spelled out exactly what that means because I'm sure it's a very deep rabbit hole to really get into. So
just like the disclaimers, right?
I'm hoping it's all going to be sort of completely unambiguous, but at the end of the day, if it isn't clear, then I'll have to make a final decision. But I'm sure most people are going to not try to abuse that.
Right. And I'll just say this. I'm sure it applies to C++ on C. We haven't seen that conference yet, but I'm sure it's applying there. I've talked to people who came as students to either CPPCon or C++ Now. I've talked to a number of them, some of whom are no longer in school and have said, this changed everything for me. It changed my perception of what's possible in the career. I met all sorts of people. People, not just students, have gotten jobs because of the contacts they made. They get invited to participate in things online and all sorts of stuff. So if you're a student in the London area or even in England anywhere, absolutely do not miss out on this opportunity. It will almost certainly change your career.
Yeah, I had an email from one father who said his 15-year-old son really wanted to go and was asking if there was any discounts they'll be able to get for him. And even though the father would pay full price. So I'm really pleased to be able to give them that discount. He was saying that he was particularly interested in meeting Matt, our guest today, and Jason Turner. So hopefully they'll make a bit of time for him at the conference.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, you're media stars, both of you.
Very strange, reluctant ones, but
it's the best kind.
Yeah, right. I suppose so.
Let's see what else is going on. Core C++ in Tel Aviv is accepting speakers, registrations, and sponsors. It slipped my mind when the date of that is. It's in 2019, but I'm not sure when. Do you remember?
Yeah, in May. I don't remember the exact dates, but it's the same dates as the Eurovision Song Contest, also in Tel Aviv.
Oh, so, okay.
So if you want to go, I'd book hotels now.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, you want.
Wow. That's it. Yeah. And for the Americans, that's a super important part of the European calendar. Is the political landscape is determined by who votes for who in the Eurovision Song Contest. So it's really important.
I'm kind of surprised that that's going to be in Tel Aviv. They consider Tel Aviv part of Europe.
I think Australia were in it last year. Is that right, Phil? I remember seeing something about it. I think there's a very loose definition of Europe.
I guess maybe they let anybody in who plays soccer. That's Europe. I don't know.
Pretty much. I mean, Britain are still in it, right?
Oh, we don't want to discuss that. That's all right. So the next topic is John's gratuitous ego stroking, and I want to congratulate myself. I am a Microsoft MVP, and I have been for 5 years. So I got my 5-year disc. And the reason I actually brought it up, other than just bragging about it, is that
we didn't quite bring it up high enough. We want to see.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I didn't look on the camera. Okay, so there's this little thing, and you add these little discs up the side. It's designed so the discs slide in, and you collect those. But they've actually changed the program a little bit, not the nature of the program, but how you get into it for people who are interested. It used to be that you could just go to Microsoft's MVP site and nominate yourself and say, this is what I do in the community. And what they're looking for, let me explain a little bit. They're looking for people. How did you phrase this, Phil? You said they were non-paid casual employees. Is that how you said it? Yeah. They're looking for people, the C++ is a little bit different than the other thing. So for the product world, if let's say you use Excel in your daily life and you live and breathe Excel macros and you get on forums and you answer questions about Excel, they want you to be part of the team in the sense that they're going to send you early versions. They're going to put you on a mailing list where you're talking about issues that come up and all those kinds of things. So C++ is a little bit different because technically I'm a Visual Studio MVP, but I don't use Visual Studio. In fact, when they talked to me about this, because they reached out to me and said, would you like to be part of the program? And I said, well, you know, I was actually a Microsoft employee for 8 years. And in all that time, I never used Visual Studio. I have never used Visual Studio except to kind of play around with it. I've never used it for a real project. And they said, well, that's okay. We're interested in people who are promoting the community and working in the C++ community. So the C++ world is a little bit different. But if you are interested in what I've said, you know, there is an email list where they talk about issues that come up with the product. Maybe it's an install program, but maybe it's also something more technical, like, you know, maybe it is a compiler bug, or maybe it's a library issue or something like that. And you want to be an insider where you can report these things and you can discuss these things, then you can participate. And what they're looking for are people who talk about C++ either on a podcast like this, or give talks, or answer questions on Stack Overflow. And those are the kinds of things they're looking for. Someone who's supporting the community. It used to be that you could go to the MVP site and explain that and say, this is what I do. And they have a form, you fill it out and you say, I do this and I do this, and here's my blog and all these kinds of things. And you could nominate yourself. But now they've decided, for whatever reason, you can no longer nominate yourself. You have to be nominated by someone who already is an MVP or someone who's a Microsoft employee. And the reason I'm bringing all this up is because if you are interested in this program, come talk to me and we'll talk about it. And maybe it makes sense that I nominate you. So anyway,
cool.
Plus, look at me. Hey,
a trophy there for the trophy cabinet.
That's right. That's right.
Well, congratulations.
Oh, yes,
thank you, sir.
5 years.
5 years, yeah. All right, so I guess we can now talk about kind of our main topic, which is Matt.
Me?
Well, actually, you know, it's not on our list, but one of the things that you mentioned just a few minutes ago made me think about that. I think the first talk you gave was the keynote at CPPCon, and of course, I made it as low as non pressured as possible by telling you that you were going to be doing the closing keynote at the largest conference on C++ that had ever.
I remember vividly because I'd never been to a C++ conference before, and I sent you an email, I think, a few weeks beforehand, and said, "Whenabouts will I be talking? I would like to go to the conference and enjoy not worrying about when my talk is, and like hopefully the earlier the better." And you replied, "I got bad news for you." And so I spent the whole week worried about it, but it was an extraordinary experience. So much fun. Much fun. Great conference.
And not your only one. You are in demand.
Yeah, well, yes, I have been to more than one conference now. Thanks again to you for, you know, gently prodding me to say, hey, I'm sure you have something to say, and we've found things. And yeah, it's been amazing. It's been an amazing change from no conferences for C++ to pretty much turning up at every other conference or so and having something to say. So I've really enjoyed it, and it's been a lot of fun meeting people. I think you said it when you talked about the students there. I think it's the same for everybody. The opportunity to interact with people that you may know on Slack, or maybe you just don't know them at all. There are a lot of people who don't have an online presence, who don't have any other, you know, you don't already know them, but you just bump into them in the hallway. And I mean, maybe with the lanyard around my neck that says my name, and people go, oh, I recognize that name. That helps, you know, gel. So I get a slightly different experience perhaps to others. But I see clumps of people talking about C++ and sharing information in a way that I just don't think you can capture using any other means. And I always have this problem because, like, whenever I'm not going to conferences, I always think to myself, well, what do you get out of a conference? It seems like a faff, it's expensive. You know, if your employer's not covering it, you've got to, you know, there's travel, there's lodging, then there's the conference itself. And you're like, well, and I can watch everything on YouTube is what you kind of tell yourself, right?
Yes.
And then you're there and you're like, oh, all of this stuff is happening and you can't get it any other way. It's only by being here in those strange hallway conversations, or going for a dinner with someone or a group of people, or bumping into luminaries and sort of having, you know, strange fun interactions with them, and kind of then being able to go say, hey, I've met Herb Sutter, you know, that's he's cool, you know, things like that. And you can't.
Did you read?
Go on, sorry.
Did you read John Heed's trip report, where he was talking about he was going up to the room where he was going to speak? He just wanted to feel it out. And he said there was somebody else up there also trying to, the doors were locked and they were just trying to get into the room. And he said, yeah, I'm going to be speaking in here. And the other fellow says, yeah, hi, I'm Scott Myers. And it was kind of like, oh, wow.
That's awesome.
But
that's
it is,
fantastic.
I don't want to oversell it, because I don't want somebody to say, oh, you know, I'm between jobs, I better go to CPPCon, I'm guaranteed to get a job. I don't want you to feel that way. What's going to happen though is just opportunities that just wouldn't happen any other way. The shared physical meet space. I mean, we can think all we want about how connected we are, being online and all that kind of stuff. And that is wonderful. It's great that we can talk to people across the world within minutes of each other. And you know, that is wonderful. But there is something about just being around, chatting casually, topics come up, you know, an idea sparks you, and then, you know, 6 hours later, you're giving a lightning talk on it. I mean, this is,
this is just refers to it as monkey time. You know, the time that you're there, you're like picking up. It's just, you have to be around other people who share your passions just to have those random interactions, you know, that you couldn't schedule. Right.
Right. And that's why, you know, we give away, well, almost all the content. There's a few sessions don't get recorded, but almost all the content is up on YouTube. And, you know, why would you, as you said, it's expensive, it's time away from home. You got to arrange, maybe, you know, things for the kids while you're gone, whatever. I mean, all this stuff you have to do, and you have to talk to your boss about it, you know, all this stuff. Why would that possibly be worth it when the content's all there? But when you go there, you realize, you know, we don't ever have, but you know, the experience is not that people come to the conference and say, well, this was a waste of time, I'm just going to stay home and watch it on YouTube. It's the opposite.
Right.
People come to the conference.
Actually, just for even the very act of saying, well, I'm going to be away for a week, I'm going to be watching this content, right? You know, you can say it's on YouTube, but like, you have to be pretty disciplined to get through enough of the content. You know, I have like a watch later list of all of the CPP cons I didn't see, or for other conferences, and I watch them like as I walk to the train station and as I walk back. You know, I try not to walk into lampposts and stuff, but you know, I can get through it. But it's really hard to find that time away. So if you have a whole week of time dedicated to filling your brain with this information, it's, I don't know, you're in a better way. Yeah, it's just easy to absorb the content, I think, like that. Although it's exhausting, I think we should stress that it's not a week away of like chilling, escaping from everything. It is absolutely knackering.
Well, that's kind of my goal. I do get, you know, that is part of the criticism is there's too many sessions going on. It's hard to choose and all that, and there's just, you know, too much going on. It starts too early. It lasts too long. And, you know, I'm happy to have that kind of criticism, because you know, the last thing I want is for somebody to say, you know, I flew halfway across the world to be here, and there's nothing interesting for me right now. Right. I'm just wasting my time. That's not going to happen.
Tyranny of choice, though, right now, is that you just always, I sort of plot my way through the schedule, and then I still feel like I end up in a different talk from the one I was planning because something else caught my interest, or
it may not be a talk at all, because it may be there were some people standing there with Scott Myers and you were talking about something and you realized this is not being recorded. I'm going to stay here and listen, listen to this conversation. Exactly. And you know, even though it's true, I had 3 things I wanted to see, but I'm going to be here. So
I think it is worth emphasizing the other side of that coin, though, that not everyone can actually sustain that level of interaction, particularly for a whole week. So yeah, if you do feel your energy is running low, do take some time out and recharge, so that you can make the most of the rest of the event as well.
Yeah,
that's a really, really valid point. Yeah, like going away and hiding in your hotel room, or just chilling out for a bit, finding a bit of spare space. I mean, I know that there's the there was the roof deck kind of area where I noticed people would sit out and just, you know, have a bit more relaxed time. Yes, it can be overwhelming with that number of people and that amount of activity going on. You're right to give yourself the space to be able to come back in fresh and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Well, and I think that will be even better at our new location because we're there in the hotel. Because right now, if you're at the conference and you just feel wiped out, then you could go back to your hotel room and take a nap, but that's, 10, 15-minute walk. and if you're already tired, that doesn't sound too exciting. Whereas at the new location, it's really, you walk down the corridor, you get in the elevator, and then you go to your room. You can do half an hour and then be back for the next session.
Right.
No problem. So one of the advantages of being at the new location.
So actually, while we're here, how will that be at CPP on Sea, Phil? Where are the hotels nearby? How would you envisage that going?
Yeah, so the closest hotel is just immediately across the road, so literally like 1 or 2 minutes walk. There's some other hotels, a few more minutes walk. So most of them are going to be closer than the hotels were in Bellevue.
Right.
I've also designated a room that's normally a bar, but as a quiet room. So if you just want some time out during the conference without going anywhere, you can just go and sit there.
Oh, fabulous!
Maybe have a quiet chat with people. So hopefully got that covered, but we'll see.
Wow.
Did you say and you can chat with people?
Yeah.
So we are thinking about, since we have a little bit more space, we're thinking about that we're going to have a quiet room at CPPCon, but we will say you can't chat with people. This is for you. You can do your email, you can do your slides, you can do whatever you need to do. You can just take a nap, but no phone calls and no chats. There will be places to do those things if you want to talk to somebody. Yeah. There's plenty of places to do that.
I was thinking of it as more like a library. So yeah, you can like talk quietly, calmly, but no distracting noise.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right.
The thing we have to think about, it boggles the mind, what goes into planning a conference. So I take my hat off to you both for doing it. I mean, I remember speaking to you, John, and you saying, like the fact that I said everything seems to be going so well. He said, yeah, but I only ever hear about the problems because that's the only thing that gets up to me. So I think it's worth reiterating that, like, from our point of view as attendees, everything always seems to just be effortless and wonderful. So thank you.
Well, that's the goal. I've told people that the success of the conference depends on the ignorance of the attendees, and by that, of course, I mean that you don't see the cracks and the flaws, and you don't see, that's the goal, is that you don't see that. And inevitably, some people do, and something disastrous happened, and we try to fix it for them, right? But I think that is that is the goal, that you go there and you assume that it all is flawless, and it's not flawless, but that's the goal, is for people to know that. So. Speaking of flawless, tell us a little bit about the fire you put out today. What happened today?
Well, I wish I knew. I actually have the logs streaming up the screen here because in case it happens again. But about a couple of hours ago, Compiler Explorer stopped responding and doing anything, and it was serving up empty lists of compilers, so the drop downs were all empty and all sorts of other strange things. I've not been able to diagnose it yet, but
so the website was technically up.
Yes,
but it was not functioning.
Unfortunately, does a lot of disservice. Like sometimes it would be better for it just not be there, but it may actually have been up enough to serve up pages. But there are so many layers of caching in front of it. There's CloudFront, and then there's an application load balancer, and then there's the actual nodes that serve it up, and there's Nginx that serves up the static. It's all layers and layers of complex things, and it was the bit at the very far end that apparently couldn't work, and as far as we can tell, something funky went on with the file system. So there are a number of nodes that serve all of the requests from Compiler Explorer, and they're sort of fanned out with a load balancer, and those nodes share about, I think, 90 gig, maybe it's 100 gig now, of compilers, right? That's a lot of compilers. And so it used to be the case that I actually installed them all on each node, and that was great. And it meant for like a long build time. I was using Docker at the time, so you'd have this Docker container that was about 30 gig that contained like every version of GCC at the time and the site and everything, and I would just sort of push that onto the machines, and they would just run the site, and it was great. But it got unwieldy. Building that and distributing it would take minutes. In fact, it took very many minutes for a new node to come up, and they come and go as the load on the system goes up and down to try and keep costs down, but make it like still responsive. So we moved away from that model and moved towards a model where I just effectively have a big shared network drive where all the compilers are stored on, because the 90 gig of compilers, of course, is mostly untouched. You know, the vast majority, you're running the CC and you're running CC1, and there's the STL headers and a few other bits and pieces. But Lord alone knows what actually goes in to make them that big. So it doesn't, we don't pay too much for the cost of transferring the small amount of data we use out of that install. But if it means that if the network goes down, or even internally the network drive fails, then we're going to see some weird things at all the nodes at once, which is unfortunately, I think, what happened. But I'm going to be investigating it immediately after this, and we'll hopefully have some idea about making sure it doesn't happen again. And again, I didn't have a phone, so I had no idea this was happening. So just before this, I was at my son's flute concert, and so I was nowhere near where I could have checked a phone anyway. And remain married. But I didn't have my phone anyway. So yes, last night was my company's holiday party, and today I was telling Phil earlier, I've been suffering all day. I actually didn't go into work today, and I was meant to be working from home, but I actually had to phone in sick from working from home, say, look, there's no way I can work. I'm just too destroyed. So it was a good party, but I left my phone in taxi.
And I was going to say, you woke up saying, dude, where's my phone? Right?
Yes. Exactly. So I have been on a bit of a journey. I mean, thankfully, phones nowadays, you can like click where the heck's my phone, and I was able to locate that I'd left it in the lift, and they've been able to sort it out. So I should be reunited with it tomorrow. But in the kind of work that I do, almost everything is two-factor authentication based. And so I had to make a call earlier today. Do I like wipe the phone and then start the long, boring process of trying to get all the apps that are 2FA moved over to a new 2FA device? It was horrible. So that also fed into my decision this morning for like, why don't I just stay in bed? Feel sorry for myself. So yeah, on the back of it, I didn't get any notifications that.
So give us a peek behind the curtain, right? How many nodes did you say?
So at the moment we're running 3 nodes. I have one that is just a relatively small instance that is there and stays up all the time. The other ones I pay this on-demand amount. So Amazon have effectively like an internal auction. You can say, hey, I'd like a faster node, but I'm only prepared to pay 5 cents an hour or whatever amount. And there's like an internal bidding system. And then if there's spare capacity and you're one of the higher bidders, you get to the node at that amount, which is pretty cool. But it means that node can be killed at any second, and in fact your bid may not be high enough to get hold of it. So that happens from time to time. So there's a couple of nodes that run like that most of the time, again subject to them actually being there not being too much load in Amazon itself. So there's 3 nodes running. We also have an administrative node, which is just a place to SSH into that's behind the firewall that the other ones live inside of. And then there's all these load balancers, and there's a ton of stuff on S3. There are Dynamo databases now for the short links. So the short links are now actually, they used to be like a shim over Google's own URL shortener. But then Google decided they're going to change the way that works, as is their way. And I thought, yeah, I think the time has come to actually own the data. So anyone who's been annoyed by all the annoying pop-ups that came up, when about 2-3 months ago when we put the system in, it was mainly to cover myself now, because I am now storing your data. I don't look at it. I don't want to look at it. But if you make a short URL, that is now being saved on S3 somewhere, so that I can serve it back up again when you ask for it again. And it has also opened the door to be able to create my own personalized short links, because I'm now in control of that. And I've been sort of toying with going down the line where, if you have an account, again, this is now getting into like speculative work for the future, but an account, maybe you can actually name links or have your own sublink and things. And that mainly came out of the fact that I started to see that, I think like you were saying earlier, that people are starting to put links, short links into papers that they're then submitting to the committee. And the problem with that is that those links are basically based off of the hash of the UI state and the code and all of the bits and pieces and which compilers you've picked, which is great. But if you notice a typo and you've already put it into a paper, you can't fix it because it would change the hash, and therefore you can't So this would adds a level of indirection.
There you go.
Okay, plug for you. And so you can actually, I can sort of think about doing that. Now, obviously, administrating it could be a nightmare. I don't really have any thoughts about it, but certainly for like people submitting papers, it might be useful for them to be able to get like a fixed link that's like, this is the example 1 of my paper, and this is the example 2 of my paper, and I can actually change it after I've submitted the paper if there's like a little tweak to make it correct.
Yeah. Well, and I can certainly see it as a presenter where I could say, well, if you want to play with this, go to, cal dot, talk 1 dot example 1 or something like that. And then
absolutely. Yeah. But at the moment it's all done through like a Python administrative script I run. So it's not exactly scalable, but there are sort of mutterings about making it more of a feature for like certain people to log in. And I definitely don't want to build like a tiered system so it gets complicated, and I don't want to like I've made it very clear that compiler explorer will be free forever for everyone, so I'm not trying to the cynic in me thinks, well, I could make this a premium feature, then my Patreons can have this, and it's like, no, that's not what it's about. I don't want it to be like that. But yeah, so yeah, anyway, the file, we don't really know what it was. So
you keep saying
yes.
How many of you are working on this? I mean, this is your initial product, but you've got help now.
It is, yes. I have a lot of help, thankfully, because I recently changed jobs and my spare time disappeared for quite a while. But we have Partouf and Ruben, and I can never say his name, and he always laughs at me trying to say it. So hopefully he'll have a chuckle at this later. Ruben, maybe that's better. They're the main administrators of the system now. About 18 months ago, I went through a bit of a tidy up, so that I went from ad hoc clicking in the Amazon UI to like make deployments and things, to actually having a tool that I wrote myself that can administer the node, start and stop them, set up which version's running where and whatever. And then that meant I felt unashamed, or less ashamed, to hand it to other people and say, hey, you have the keys to the plantation too. You can do the work now. And that was a great investment of time, is allowing them to administrate it.
Sure. That lets you go to flute concerts.
Exactly, it does, right? so yeah, so there are others. There are many others that contribute lots of code. We get loads of pull requests, but Partouf and Ruben are the sort of like the main other two people who are both administrating the system and merging pull requests and fixing bugs, and yeah. And so it's amazing. It's probably the best. I mean, there are two things that I love the most. The two things I love the most about this project is that now it's sort of got a life of its own, and I go away for a week and I come back and it's like 2 site updates have happened that I didn't even know. There are features that I went in because I thought if we talk about like some of the newer things that are in, there are features I'd forgotten that have been put in because I haven't really been involved with them. And it's like, wow, I forgot we had that. That's cool. I'm going to use that at work. And then, so that's one aspect of it, the fact that it's grown. The other aspect is that it was my funny little project for, effectively high frequency trading, not the well looked upon necessarily industry, and all about eking out the performance to make something a bit faster. Let's look at the compiler. Can we do X or can we do Y? How does it tweak? How does the compiler see my code? And then I hear from people like Jason Turner and Kate Gregory and other people that say, like, we use this to teach. I mean, you John, I think you've mentioned as well, like, this is a teaching aid. Or I get people emailing me from universities saying, hey, can we use your site in our course because we're teaching compiler design and it would be really useful to be able to, and that's the best thing ever. It's just, beyond what I ever imagined using the site for. Others are using it, and in such a way that like brings us all forward, brings the state of knowledge, disseminates knowledge, but more. Gosh, I'm tying myself in knots here. I don't know where I'm going. I'm just excited that it's being used for things that I mean, I still bring it up like 3 times a day just to sort of stare at the coding and go, oh, I can do that. Oh, that's good. That means I can write human readable code. But the little assembly hacker in me is still happy that actually the compiler is going to do the right thing.
Yeah. Actually, I was thinking about it when I was reading. So Jonathan Bacara's he sent me an early version of a blog that he's about to write because I'd made a comment to his earlier blog, and this is related to that. So he sent this and he said, I'm about to do this. And I was playing because he was using something called QuickBench, which I probably should have known about, but I had never used it before.
Right, Fred Tingo's site. It's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
But as I was playing with it, I was thinking, I'd really like to be able to see, because some of the results of QuickBench are like so really? It's like
benchmarking is always
And so I would like to have actually seen, okay, now what is the compiler actually generating here? I would feel more confident, maybe the two of them. I mean, looking at what the compiler generates doesn't actually tell you something's faster because instructions are not, right? So you kind of want both. But if you get some kind of anomaly
on Quickbench to dump out the code, it can even run perf on the code and give you some idea about where it thinks the CPU is spending time. So there's a little bit of that in there.
I see. I guess I didn't find that.
And I think some of the more difficult things I think for Quickbench is that, you know, just like Compiler Explorer, where looking at the assembly can give you a completely false sense of security that, you know, something is faster or slower. I mean, about the only thing you can say with certainty that is if I write my code like this or like this, and the exact same assembly instructions are repeated, that they are equivalent. I think that's one thing we can all say, like, fair enough. But yeah, it's very beguiling to think, oh yeah, look, there are fewer instructions, it must be faster, or there are more instructions. And the same thing is true with Quickbench. You know, like benchmarking is extremely hard. The compiler is very, very smart at noticing that you're not really doing the right thing, and so it throws loads of things away. And or you know,
well, that was in what he did. He did a number of things, and when he got to the final step, the benchmark optimized everything away. And I mean, and it was obvious that it had done so because the time went to zero, literally zero. And so one of the things I suggested, I said, well, you could try doing this. And basically what he was trying to do was manipulate some things in this buffer and doing it in a loop. And he was trying to test which version of this loop is going to work faster. And the problem was, of course, at some point he figured out, or the compiler figured out, that he was never actually looking at the results after he did it. And so it didn't matter whether it was done or not. And so it just turned it off. The other thing for Quickbench that I was trying to figure out is what we were doing in the loop was to pass in a lambda or a freestanding function. And one of the things that we couldn't do is because it does a single translation unit. So we couldn't do a lambda or a freestanding function that was not inlined.
Well, you see, they're
in to test that.
Yeah, that's it. You can do it. You can like give it the function call attributes to say no inline, which you can even. I think Jason had one of his recent C++ weeklies was like, you know, using the double square brackets nowadays is better than all the horrible pragma nonsense you had to do before, or __ attribute 2 parens. So you can actually do that. And there's a couple of cases in the code base that I'm working on at work where I've had to do that on purpose because I definitely want to pull stuff out of line. I'm like, no, this essentially will never be called. Don't pollute the cache. Don't even think about inlining it. Don't even bring it in. Don't bring it nearby. Mark it cold. Throw it off of that. And I think you could probably do the same thing there. But, you know, there's always this danger when you're benchmarking stuff where you're trying to maneuver the compiler to not doing the thing you wanted to do. And the interesting thing I think about what you said there, I mean, 2 things. Quickbench uses Google Benchmark, which has a whole selection of interesting do not optimize away like methods that you can call that do tricks to variously try and convince the compiler to still do the work.
So I probably could have found something if I'd
possibly. And then the second point about the translation units is that I think we should stop. You know, we've been doing this long enough that we know that that's kind of how the compiler has historically worked. Is if it can only see one thing at a time, then it's taking its little microscope on each piece of code. We know it can't inline. But there's nothing to stop it from doing the inlining. And once you turn on link time optimization, which I wholeheartedly recommend everybody do for their release builds, then you can't be making those kinds of assumptions. And again, it's like folks like us have been doing this for years. We're like kind of like, well, I know how to trick out the compiler this time. I'm going to move it into another file. You're like, nope, compilers are getting smarter all the time. You can always.
Well, it's kind of like people reasoning about undefined behavior. They say, well, technically it's undefined behavior, but I know what the compiler is going to do, and it's okay.
And I think it's more of an arms race.
Yeah. I think that's the best way of thinking about it. And I think who was it? I think it was Kate Gregory that said something about reasoning about undefined behavior, and I remember somebody else making that exact comment, and it hits true so much. You know, again, I remember the first half of my career was essentially, unbeknownst to me, undefined behavior, or taking advantage of, and just knowing what the compiler would do and tricking it and going, well, if we make this thing volatile, which now is like a complete trigger word for everyone, as it should be,
yes, then
the compiler does what I want it to do, or it won't do the thing that it was doing before, where it was doing, I think, something bad. So yeah,
it's the problem with people. the problem with people getting too familiar with their compiler rather than with the standard.
Correct. That's the best way.
Because what happens is the next version of the compiler, all bets are off, because, you know, oh no, we used to always do that, but now.
So that's another bugbear of mine. So I'm glad we're sort of going through a little list of things that annoy the heck out of me. The reluctance for people to move to the latest compiler. Now, obviously, if you have tons of benchmarks and your code is important or performance is important, then you can run with the new compiler and discover it's a performance regression. I kind of get it, but there's a lot of fuddishness, fear, uncertainty, doubt about people moving from compiler to compiler. And most of it does come back to exactly what you said. They got too familiar with the particular implementation of the undefined behavior they were already taking advantage of before. And so now you're stuck at GCC 492 because, well, it works with our code base. And now obviously it's hard to say to somebody, well, your completely working code with this compiler is actually fundamentally flawed. You need to, in order to get to GCC 5 even, you need to fix 20,000 bits of code here everywhere and test the heck out of it or whatever. That's unfortunate, but to me, I think that's the tax that you pay, because you should pay, and you should pay it in small increments. You should say, hey, GCC 8.2 is out. Brilliant. Let's move from GCC 8.1 to 8.2, because unless there's a compelling reason not to, and I mean genuinely compelling reason, it's worth the 2 or 3 days or however long it might take, depending on your infrastructure, to move to it, get all the new warnings, get all the new errors, get the bugs fixed, have the optimizer learn new tricks, and maybe they will find flaws in your code. And that's a good thing, but ultimately you're going to be better off. I mean, like GCC 9, I think is going to be out, Q2 next year, and I'm already like itching to get it into my code base. I think it's just we should be thinking like this. I mean, I'm fortunate. I'm on Linux, and putting down a compiler and like plopping it into source control, or chucking on like an install step is relatively straightforward for me. And I'm a huge proponent of the idea of like having something like decent package management systems, and such things are starting to become more mainstream. Things like Conan and VC package or whatever, making it as easy as possible for your developers and yourself to say, hey, I've just checked in a thing, and the thing I've checked in is the compiler.version file somewhere, and now suddenly everything will build with the new compiler, because the system that we've built knows how to move from that one version to the next. And it just means that there's no longer this kind of and maybe this is an artificial thing in my mind, but I've definitely worked at companies where there was the new developer comes on board, they give them the computer and go, here's the 300 pages of things that you have to do to your computer before you have the build setup working. And, then they're never up to date and it's not working. And then you're like, well, there's a reason why we don't change compiler, because someone will have to try and work out how on earth to install that compiler. And it's such a difficult thing. And yeah, anyway, sorry, I've just gone off on one here and nobody told me not to.
That's what the show is about.
It reminded me of, I can pull this up. There's I'm looking at my own blog here. I don't tout my own blog because I don't write it very often. But there's a great blog entry, and it's about this CERT vulnerability note. And what they're talking about is that compilers can. There was this huge thing. This actually happened in Linux, where there was a function that would check to see if the pointer that was passed in was null. If it was null, it would do one thing. If it wasn't, it would do something else. And someone else came along later and added a debugging line of code where they said, print out what this thing is pointing to, which means that you referenced the pointer. And the compiler looked at that and said, well, if this was null, that would be undefined behavior. So we can assume it's not null. That doesn't mean that it isn't null. It means that if it is null, it doesn't matter what they generate anyway. It's undefined behavior. And so what happened was this was in the Linux kernel, right? Yeah, and so they suddenly had this bug, and there was a huge argument between the Linux kernel people who were saying, if we put a null test in, you do it. And the compiler people who were quite rightly saying, it's undefined behavior. Fix your code. It's not a problem with the compiler. So I think GCC actually has a flag now that says always check nulls or whatever it is, because that was the
no dereference check. There's
right.
Yeah, exactly.
But the blog post I wrote was about the fact that there's this security recommendation that is telling people not to upgrade their compiler because newer compilers are exploiting undefined behavior to get better performance. And they're saying, don't upgrade your compiler. And of course, my whole blog is me going off on them saying, you know, you're getting a safer compiler with every version. Now, yes, there are bugs introduced, but there's also bugs getting fixed. You're getting better performance. You're getting better overall. And if what you're trying to do is protect yourself from undefined behavior, the solution is to change your code, not to lock yourself into a compiler that's 10 years old or whatever.
I think the tide has turned to some extent. I think there's enough people now that are aware of the kinds of things that smell like undefined behavior to think about asking. Whereas I think there was a long time when undefined behavior wasn't even something I thought about or knew about, really. It just was, you know, oh, I don't do that thing, it crashes. Well, that's fine. But I think we've now reached the point where most people that I talk to anyway are aware that there is this thing called undefined behavior, and then you can have the conversation. But maybe that hasn't. There are a lot of like old school folks doing C development on the Linux kernel, and I wonder if that's just something that hasn't made it down to, I mean, to the C community as much. I don't know, but certainly I think you're right. The way to solve it is by education, but that's on us to some extent as a community to say, you know, there is this thing called undefined behavior. This is what it looks like. It is actually a net benefit to you. You don't realize it, but it is a net benefit. The compiler can make some very smart decisions because of it. So it's defining defining undefined behavior, which is obviously everyone's knee-jerk reaction. Is like, why do we just define it? And how hard can that be? It's not the answer.
Java does it. How hard can it be?
Right. That's true. That is true. But Const does it as well, right? It's or at least it doesn't do it. It says like it stops you from doing any undefined behavior, which is kind of a nice thing.
Well, one of the things that's kind of interesting is that undefined behavior is not defined. By that I don't mean the behavior is defined. What I mean is there's no index in the standard. You can't go to the standard and say, what are all the things that are undefined? Well, you can divide by 0. You can do this. You can do this. It turns out that there's all sorts of places within the standard where it says doing this is undefined, but there's no place that pulls that all together and says, here are the 99 ways that you can shoot yourself in the foot. We
need to get John Reger in and ask him. He was like up to like 300 or something that he thought a list of like undefined behavior things is, it's not good really.
Right. And separating those from things that are, you know, platform defined or something like that, because there's all these different areas. And
so undefined behavior is undefined, and std logic error is a logic error.
That's true. That's true.
There's an interesting connection between those two things, because we actually use std logic error to make undefined behavior defined.
That's true. Yes.
Wow. Mind blown. That's whoa.
Heard it here first. So let's see. What else should we talk about running the site? I'm very curious about running the site. But maybe not everybody is.
I wouldn't mind drawing people's attention to. I mean, there's some cool little stats I just picked up before we came on air, and that I thought would be interesting. So Compiler Explorer is currently doing 1 million compiles a week, which is mind-boggling. So that's the most we've ever had is 228,000 on one day. And that was actually last month. And I don't know what happened on November the 8th. Maybe someone was scraping the API or doing something. Because people do this. We occasionally get, I noticed when the Bing's robot thing hits the site, because I'll get a sudden peak in the number of like short URL, like URL shortener things. Like my database reads go up through the roof suddenly as it's just hitting them one after another, going like, what about this one? What about this one? So that's quite fun. But so yeah, 1 million a week, which means around about 50 million a year. That's a lot of code compiled. And it's some new features that I think is worth drawing people's attention to, because they're lots of fun to play with. And again, right, the thing about Compiler Explorer that always makes me feel weird when I'm sort of excited about all these new things. It's like I'm merely showcasing other people's hard work, right? The compilers are the stars here, the tools are the stars here. I've just written a bit of HTML and a bit of JavaScript, which is it continues to annoy me at some deep level that like my entire career has been C++, low latency, fast, high throughput game programming, finance and stuff. And the things that I'm well known for are JavaScript. It's just JavaScript is a fine language, but it is actually even probably more upsetting to work with than C++ in terms of all the weird edge cases. But yes, things that are new, they're in the site. So there's a tools option now. If you look at the top right-hand corner of a compiled window, there's a tools drop down, and in there is LLVM.
And what's the URL for this again?
You can go to compiler-explorer.com, but I would probably recommend you go to the more popularly named one. You're just teasing me now, John.
Yes, I am. Matt.com, isn't it?
That's right. I might have to just change my last name. That's the easiest way to get everyone to go over to compiler. But no, so there's the story.
Change your last name to Explorer.
Yes, a hyphenated compiler-explorer. Yeah, no, I'm sort of strangely shy about the fact that it's obviously everyone calls it Godbolt, but you know, in the same way that Google doesn't want to say Google all the time for fear of like losing control of their own name, I try not to. And that's why I have compiler-explorer.com. But people have taken me to one side and said, why would you throw away this? It's a funny little short name that has come to mean this, so go with it. And so I suppose I am begrudgingly going with that now, but I will still try not to say it. Anyway, the tools. You can now run LLVM MCA on the output of your compiler. So that means you can write in a bit of C code, you can have it compile with all the options you've got, and then you can run LLVM MCA on the result of that. So now you've got like a chain of windows. The LLVM MCA, which is really easy to say, is the machine code analyzer. And what it does is it takes the internal model that LLVM has of the instruction set, the ISA of a particular CPU, and it uses it kind of in reverse and says, okay, given that I have this sequence of operations, these instructions, how does the CPU actually break them down into micro operations? How does it schedule them? And where will the bottleneck be as a result of either like the divider is always in use, or the multiplier, or this read is then used 3 times in a row and there's register contention. It's really quite cool. And I'd absolutely love to have time to spend time taking the output from that, which is just ASCII, and parsing it out or generating, you know, making a patch for LLVM MCA that does like JSON output, and then like visualizing it. Because, you know, my other thing that I love doing in JavaScript as well is writing like CPU emulators, usually for old computer systems, as you know. But in my sort of dream world, I will write the world's most perfect x86 emulator in JavaScript, with all of this information in it as well, and then you can like single step through your code and see how it runs through the CPU, you know, caches, and amazing. Never going to happen, but that would be what I would love to do. So LLVMCA is like a little step in that direction. It's a cool little tool. Clang Tidy is on the list of tools that you can run as well, which will obviously tell you things about your code and tell you that, you know, you're doing.
Where's the tool list? I've got the UI up here.
Right, let me just. Yep, there we go. So if you've got the oh, my computer is being extraordinarily slow now, or maybe the site's down. Oh, sugar, no, yeah, the site's done that funny thing again. Oh well, live problem. So I've been returned an empty document of compilers, and so I have been, while we've been talking, running with the debugging open so I can kill that. But if it was working, up the top right of the assembly output, there's the add tool ... And on the drop down there, you've got Clang Tidy, LLVM MCA, and PA hole, which is a very strangely named thing, which sounds faintly not safe for work. Is it just me, or is Godbolt broken? Someone has just said in Hash General. We may have to finish up pretty soon, guys, because I may have to go and fix something. But yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, I couldn't find the menu, but now I see it. There's a menu. It's on the extreme right.
Add tool, yes, and so you can add things like Clang Tidy, and then PA hole is just recently been merged in by. These are all things that other people have submitted pull requests for. Incidentally, this is not my work.
Right.
PA hole, it looks at structures and says, you know, where is all the padding? So if you've written bool double in your struct, you're wasting like 14 odd bytes of space in the gaps between things, and it kind of recommends ways to reorder things, which is interesting. It's one of those things that the compiler can't save you from, and that's I think somebody's talking at C++ on C. I think they're going to be talking about the kinds of things that compilers can and can't do. I imagine they may mention things like that too. There are, you know, the things that compilers.
I'll have to look out for that.
Yeah, you should do. Yeah. So I'm gonna have to say, and so we're on Slack at the moment as well. For those listening at home, I'm just going to quickly reply and sit there and say I will fix it very soon.
We won't keep you much longer.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time. We're going to have you back soon, because we've just barely scratched the the list of the things I wanted to talk about. But one of the things I did want to talk about is, again, on this compiler list, is you have versions of compilers that support language features that are still experimental.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to talk about what you've done with Arthur.
Yeah, so Arthur sent me basically
Arthur O'Dwyer.
Arthur O'Dwyer, who's the mastermind behind the what's it called? Movable,
trivially relocatable.
Relocatable, yes. Which is an awesome idea, and only awesome because I actually have a thing at work right now where I have a to-do that says, as soon as it's trivially relocatable, I can do this thing that I really want to do now. But until then, I just have to deal with memcopy. Anyway, yeah, so he sent me an email, said, hey, I have a patched version of Clang. Is there any chance we can get it into Compiler Explorer? And I'm like, absolutely. There's a lot of sophistication is strong. There is a lot of duct tape and glue and other bits and pieces holding together the world's worst continuous build system that I've cobbled together, as we were talking about before the show, which allows me to build compilers and deploy them on a daily basis. So I build all of I build GCC and Clang, the regular branches, and I also build. There is a couple. What have I got? I've got a list somewhere. I'll have to get the list. But there is obviously Arthur's version of Clang is there. There's the CPPX branch, which has Herb and Andrew Sutton's marvelous meta class sort of proposal thing in there as well. I think that one's building daily. But yeah, so if people have ideas, if people want to get a patched version of the compiler into Compiler Explorer, it's relatively straightforward. There's a lot of I can point you at a change list or a pull request that one of those fine folks have given me. And
so this is a great thing, because as I was saying to you again before the show, we were talking about this. I said, if I have a new library, that's fine. I'd send you my library and you can run it in your world, whatever that is, whatever platform you're on, whatever compiler you're on. But if I'm working on a language change or an extension to the language or something like that, there's kind of no way that anybody but me can play with it. And even I can't really play with it because, it's all theoretical, but if I can patch Clang and actually get it out there so that I don't have to send people a copy of Clang, they can just go to Compiler Explorer and try it out. That's right. Kind of cool. Although it would also be cool if we could actually see it run, but that's people who are actually playing with languages. Maybe that's not the first thing they want to do. They want to look at what
maybe we can do something about the making it run thing. So it's long been my dream to actually have execution. Right. Obviously, we should say that Wandbox is out there. Oh crikey, there's another one. There are at least another two. There's regex tester or something. It's a very weirdly named site or that does execution. It's long been on the roadmap for me. So my Patreon level reached a point where I have promised to dedicate one evening a week to just hacking on Compiler Explorer, and I have been using that to kind of get through the backlog and get through all of the just triaging the bugs. But last week I started again picking at the edges of the execution support. So I would like to get there. That would be fun. So maybe
I use CPP reference for that. So I use kind of
which
Compiler
I think
Explorer and CPP reference.
Yeah.
What's that?
I think it's powered by one of the other things I mentioned. I don't think it's
yeah, they give credit to it, but that's just the UI I know. And so, yeah.
Someone has just filed a bug now on Compiler Explorer saying, "Hey, there's no languages there." I'm like, oh, so I'm going to click the high priority label, and yeah.
Well, I think we've run out of time. We'll have to have you back, but we won't have you back next week, and the reason is that we have Hannah.
Yay!
Hannah's
so amazing.
Yes. I'm very excited to have her. Everybody's been talking about her talk. Somebody even said we should have shirts made for people who saw the talk at the conference. I saw Hannah's talk in person, right? I think it was just because it was so long to get the video up or something like that. But anyway, video's up now, guys.
Yes.
What's that?
It was a remarkable talk. I wasn't there. I'm not going to get the t-shirt. I think she's doing it again or a similar version.
C++ on C, yeah.
So I will be definitely there. I promise you, Hannah, I will be there.
This C++ on C sounds like it's going to be the happening place.
Yeah.
And that's just right around the corner, right? That's only 2-3 months away.
3 months. Yeah.
you want to see a conference organizer's face turn white. You just tell them how long it is before their conference. And they will panic. It's like, Oh, really? Yeah. So we'll have Hannah on Friday, and it's going to be much earlier in the day. Much earlier in the day. For those of us in California, you're going to have to get out of bed really early.
Yes, right. But
we're looking forward to that, and we will just definitely have to have you back, Matt.
It's always fun to be here. It's a lot of fun just chatting with you guys. It's easy. It's fun. My family have just arrived back. Actually, they were over there sort of whispering in the corner. It's very distracting now, but but you make it very relaxed and chilled, and it's so yeah.
They can all join in next time.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. So is there anything else? I know we didn't cover all the items. Is there anything we had to cover, Phil, before we?
No, I think we covered everything that we
needed.
Should we
tease the things that we didn't talk about? The tool views we did, the lock-free stuff, the green field starting from scratch. Boy, just so many things. We just tease everybody and say, you
mentioned like Conan very, very briefly. That's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't have a chance to write my love letter to Phil and the rest of the Sea Lion team for making such an amazing product and saving my bacon recently as my
that's right. You were talking about.
My new company has given me this thing, and I don't know how to use it. It doesn't do Linux, but luckily I have a Linux machine somewhere else, and so I can write my code here, and magic happens, and it builds and runs on the other place. So thank you, JetBrains, for that. That's an awesome feature. I didn't explain it, but it's magic.
The remote, what is it called? Remote what?
Remote working.
Remote working. Huh.
Oh, that's cool.
Obvious name, yeah.
Or remote development, depending on who you speak to.
Right. As opposed to my code, which is it doesn't remotely work.
That's right.
Hey. It's Phil whose job is to do the bad puns. So.
Sorry.
There's plenty to share around.
All right. Well, it's that time. In fact, it's probably a little bit past that time. But we need to say to all the listeners, both the video listeners and the audio listeners, safe coding.
Safe coding.